If you've been enjoying R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all platforms or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. So I'll cut out some of the other silly stuff at the start here. But I think I'm trying to think where I'm looking at my notes here. I'm trying to think where we want to start. Let's see this. So probably a month or so ago, Elena introduced the two of us over email, and we had to adjust schedules a couple times. We're finally able to hop on and chop it up, which I'm very excited for. Let's talk about
Same here.
your time at Deloitte. Deloitte is a beast of a company. Everyone knows it. What do you think the best lesson that you learned at Deloitte was?
Man, one of the best lessons I learned at Deloitte was actually networking. Because even as a consultant, you have to network to kind of get on projects and learn the who's who. You have to show face. So I learned the power of connection and collaboration during my time there.
Love it. And that obviously is a beautiful segue and transition into a little bit about you. I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself to my audience a little further. That networking, connection, communication skills that you learned there probably helps you out a lot in your day to day, but I don't want to spoil anything. But I'd love to give you a chance to just introduce yourself to my group here.
Yeah, first and foremost, man, I appreciate you having me on your show. So a little bit about me is I have a company called BrightMind Consulting Group. My name is Jevon Wooden. I am a speaker, author, and coach. And who I coach is primarily leaders in companies, and I help them to develop empathetic cultures and teams so that they can maximize the bottom line. And I got into this after the military. I served 12 years in the Army, and now talk about lessons, man. That taught me a lot about what I want to do. But I don't want to keep rambling, so I'll just, if you want me to keep talking about that, I'm happy to.
We'll double click on that in a second here. I know Houston's where
Absolutely.
you call home now, but where are you from originally?
Yeah, Rochester, New York. I was born and
Okay.
raised.
All right. Are you a Bills fan or what NFL team do you support?
I am an Eagles fan. And a lot of people are like, what the heck? You were born in New York, you're an Eagles fan? Yeah, man, I just always love Eagles' demeanor and how they handle business. Brian Dawkins was my favorite player when he was around. Jeremiah Trotter, and then, of course, we had Randall Cunningham and Donovan McNabb.
Those McNabb years were special. The five and green. Let's
Yeah,
uh
man.
let's go then. So from Rochester, walk us through what got you maybe from growing up there to getting into the army. There's so many different ways and paths everyone gets to getting into the service. But what was your journey like for that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in poverty and I just didn't want it anymore. I got into trouble at 17. I was sitting in a jail cell for a few months awaiting my fate. I was facing like 7 years in prison, and the judge gave me another shot. And I was like, you know what? I got to do something with this. When I was in there, my mother she pretty much put the house up so I could get a lawyer and didn't have to use a public defender. And that taught me value. That it didn't just tie to money, that it was more to life than what I was risking my life for. So I graduated high school, couldn't afford college. It's like, man, what can I do? I'm working two full-time jobs so I don't go back to getting in trouble. And one night I was at work, and I used to work at a hospital, and there was this guy who was moonlighting there on the weekends, and he was actually an army recruiter. Like, you know what? You should come down to the recruiting station. I was like, this was on a Saturday. On a Monday, I was there taking my ass fab. And that's like the aptitude test. So you know what jobs you're good for. I did very well. He was like, you can have any job that you want. And I chose IT because I wanted something that would translate well into the civilian side. So a couple months later, I was on that bus to what they call MEPS to get checked in the process, and I didn't look back.
Crazy. Now, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, 4 months at 17 is probably felt like 40 years.
Yes.
What do you remember about that time? If you want to get into it, what do you remember learning, thinking about? I mean, that's a lot of time in solitude for a kid to have. What was that like for you at that time?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And I think that this was actually the time where I learned the biggest lesson, right? I was sitting in that jail cell and there was no one else who could save me. So I learned really one how to go within myself, and answer some of those tough questions. Why was I there in the first place? What got me here? What led me down this path? And I really felt like I was letting down. I realized that life was more than about me. Those same people that I wanted to do well for, my mom, my siblings, I was letting down. So that was my first chance to really tap into a higher power as well, because I had never prayed on my own. I was always praying just because I was told to pray, right? I really didn't take it seriously, because I was like, man, why, if why are we poor? Right? If anybody cared about us, why are we poor? Why are we broke? Why we struggle just to eat? So that really was that time. And then, I just recall one day sitting in that jail cell. It was actually the day after the visit from my mom and my sister, and I had cried. I had held in all this stuff all this time as a kid. I never really wanted to cry. Didn't want to have anyone see me with tears, because I was told that that was weak. But that was really where I learned that vulnerability is strength, and just letting that out was like so freeing and so cleansing. And I still carry that lesson with me today.
Like, yeah, vulnerability is strength. I like that. Now, one of the things that I struggle with in building this show out is talking about reason for everything and what life is working for you on your behalf, but then juxtaposing that with things like childhood illnesses or your loved ones getting hurt or sick, or in your situation, having tough life circumstances and situations put a 17-year-old in jail. How do you go about addressing a thought like that? Like, how can I go to someone who's in your shoes and say, "Hey, there's a reason for everything"? What do you think about that? How would you kind of grapple with that? Because it's something I struggle with in terms of explaining and using R4E in my day to day for situations like that.
Yeah, I love that, man, and I love that this platform. So appreciate you sharing it with me once again. I do really feel that there's a reason for everything, but no one ever said that that reason was for you, right? So I typically say that, oftentimes the lessons we learn, the hard lessons we learn, are for us to share, right? If we look at the Viktor Frankls of the world, who had horrible situation, like his family was pretty much massacred, in German camps, right, encampments. So like when I look at those people who can still say, hey, I felt sorry for the guards who had to do that, and really mean that and share that compassion, it helps me to see that, when we say reason for everything, one is the lessons that we've learned. Our stories, our experiences are meant to be shared. And that's really the largest reason for everything to me, is to share, help someone else become better, help someone else to tap in and see that, their situations are not permanent. Everything we go through is really temporary. And we have the power within our minds to kind of see that the obstacle really is the way. Speaking of my man Ryan Holiday, right? A lot of the obstacles we face, if we just take a moment to pause and stop feeling and internalizing things as woe is me, then we can find out what that reason is, right? And Stephen Hawking, another person, a brilliant mind, right, who just somehow was walking in college one day, was just fine, ended up wheelchair bound, not even be able to speak. But he found his reason in all of that stuff was to take it outside of the physical body, the physical being, right, and take it to the astrophysicist level. So we just have to do the same thing. How can we externalize it, right? Remove it from our personal being and say, how can I apply this to the greater good?
Where'd you learn this realm of spirituality and the Ryan Holidays and the astrophysicists of the world? When did you first get your dose of this stuff?
Man, it's funny. I've always been a reader. I've been a voracious reader since I was younger, but I didn't understand the lessons, right? So Stephen Hawking was one of the people that really fascinated me. I had followed his story when I was younger. So I just like now I'm able to apply it to something that's different. And I've always been into the Stoicism way of thinking. So like the Ryan Holidays and the great philosophers of history, really the lessons they learn, sometimes they feel a little dense, but being able to break it down and just talk about it, I geek out on those types of things, man.
Same man. Every time I've talked about this on this show a bunch, every time I'm like looking for an answer in life, I open up a book like the Daily Stoic or whatever it is,
Yes.
and the answer is right there on that exact page, or in that 5 pages I'm reading before bed. And I'm like,
Absolutely.
why can't I just read 100 pages of this today and have all the answers? And then to your point, I remember these books are so dense that you could try to read it, or you could look at the words on a page for hours, but you're not going to be able to process it. They're so dense. You really have to go bite-sized pieces in order to truly digest what they're actually talking about in these books. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And then another thing is like, it's easier to like read it and like theoretically, digest it or tell someone else what they need to do. But when it comes to our own lives, it's a lot tougher to apply it, right? And so I've learned that the hard way a few times.
It's also, and it's one of the gaps that I'm trying to bridge in this show is it's great to read about so much of this, mindset, motivation, spirituality, stoic types of readings, but actually applying that into a day-to-day job when there are bills to pay and there's expectations to be met and clients to make
Yes.
happy is a real challenging phenomenon that I'm actively trying to figure out answers to myself. And part of why I like doing this show too. But it's an interesting balance, and I think about all the time. It's hard for me to in my world of my W-2 day job, being in this realm of spirituality and faith and belief and trust, but then balancing that with a bunch of type A high performers, numbers on a screen, and trying to balance those two things I find challenging.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to like really tap into your values daily. Kind of slow yourself down and reevaluate. One of the things that really helps me to set the tone for the day as I deal with different personalities, situations, and circumstances is my gratitude practice in the morning. Every morning, yes, I think a higher power, but I also look to myself and say, okay, what could I be thankful to me for? And the reason why I started that is because oftentimes I struggled with celebrating my own wins, my own successes. I always felt like I had to go, 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 go. Or I wasn't doing enough, or, all these different things. So sometimes you just have to find like a routine, a ritual that you can get into with yourself to slow yourself down and really stop allowing everyone else to make their world a priority so you can like be within your own world for a bit.
So good, man. I'm just jotting down note after note.
Yes, sir.
Slowing yourself down is a huge thing that I've been trying to work on. I heard a great quote from someone super special to me. They said, you should be in an, I always butcher it, but something along the lines of, you need to be unbelievably focused at not being in a rush.
Yes.
There's no need to rush around at all.
Love that.
And like that, it was just they gave that big statement, and I think about it in a couple of ways. I talk about this a lot in my soapbox of, if you're rushing around, it's because you're not prepared enough. Almost everything you can kind of get ahead of, you're either not planning out enough time to get from point A to point B, you're not preparing enough before, a podcast where I could have had all my setup done before I went to work, whatever it is. It's either that's the case, or you just have to take it with a grain of salt, or take the universe coming to you as is, and know that a lot of the stuff is out of your control, and you'll get that. You're being delivered to your destiny, and you'll get there when you get there.
Absolutely. And I love that. And one of the problems with slowing down for a lot of people and why they struggle with it is because they're so focused on outcomes, right? We have to realize as people, we do not really control the outcome. We'd like to, but we don't. There are so many small pieces of minutia that have to go right for a thing to go exactly how we want it to go. So what I've realized is the journey, right? No matter what bumps and bruises I take on that journey, I need to embrace that. Like you said, oftentimes, we could have prepared for something, but there's also things that are just life aspects. I wasn't blessed with LeBron's talents, no matter that I wanted to, right? Should I be upset about that? No, right? I should not. I should realize that there are other things that I was gifted with that someone else could look at me and say, I wish I had, right? So I like to say that we have to practice gratitude in a multitude of ways. And that really, for me, micro meditations has been very helpful. So what I do throughout the day is, like, if I find myself getting worked up, or I just take a proactive step to just pause in place. And I like to do a technique called square breathing, where I just like breathe in, breathe everything out for 4 seconds, hold that for 4 seconds, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, then let it all out. And I do that as many times as I need to, because a lot of what we experience is a physical response, right? There's a physical response to it. So if we say, damn, I should have prepared for that podcast before I went to work, then we start going down a rabbit hole, right? We start rushing to try to put it together. We start breaking things, right? The setup doesn't work. And then we're just like, man, I knew that was always happening. And then we like internalize it and we make it permanent. We say things always go wrong for me when I win, right? So we really have to slow ourselves down so we understand that it's just a temporary thing, right? So slow ourselves down, move with intentionality, right? Make sure you're doing it right as you can, and then handle as it may whatever comes. And once we get into that routine and that practice of doing that, we're able to take the adversity a lot better than if we just automatically expect things to go right.
I was listening to Alex Hormozy on the Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris Williamson,
Mm-hmm.
and he was saying we put so much emphasis on the word should, like we should be doing something this way, or I should be feeling this way, or it should have gone this way. And he was talking about how arrogant that is for us to even have that thought, or I shouldn't be feeling this sad. Well,
Yes.
his thought was, well, if you make an expectation that you're less sad than someone else's, that's making an assumption that you're just could be completely factually incorrect. And if you have the choice of either guessing that potential feeling that someone else is having, or just choosing to not feel that way yourself, you do the latter and be a lot happier and have a much higher quality of life. And so that's obviously blanket statements, and I butchered that quote, I'm sure. The point being is
I
we
love
put
that.
so much emphasis on this word should that, like, in reality, it's all just a matter of what's going on between our 2 ears. And we have the choice, to your point, with gratitude and mindfulness to figure out how we want to go about our day to day.
Yeah, the reason why I like that should piece is I talk a lot about the difference between an expectation and an aspiration, right? When you expect for something to happen, you are almost setting yourself up for experiencing that I should have, right? Because you thought it was going to go exactly the way that you wanted it to go. And when it doesn't, it throws off your whole mental, your demeanor, your emotional state and everything. But if you aspire to get something or make something happen that way, you're willing to do the work, but you're also willing to adjust and be flexible to anything that goes wrong, right? So it just puts you in a different state. And that's why for like my clients and everyone else, I always say, don't expect, aspire. Aspire, you will do the work and you'll be prepared for whatever may come of it. You'll create contingencies. You'll be able to address the adversity a lot better, and it won't throw off your emotional and mental states as it would if you expected.
That old Wayne Dyer quote of open to everything, attached to nothing. You're focused on the
Yes,
journey, that destination doesn't matter. And now I
absolutely.
realize we're 20 minutes into the show. There's probably very little retention because we've been going pie in the sky for the last 20 minutes. So shout out to Elena for, knowing that the two of us could talk for probably another 3 hours on this world. Let me pull us down to reality for a second, because we could keep going, I'm sure, and we should keep going at some point. At what point did you get into this whole world? Because for me, and I've talked about it on this show a bunch, I was like, I think I was 24, and it was right when the world was opening back up post pandemic. I had read The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz in December of 2020, I think it was. And that was my first dose of this whole world at its core.
Mhm.
From there, I started listening to some podcasts in this space. I discovered The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, Robin Sharma, and just was going way down this rabbit hole spirituality, mindset, motivation. These books had, been on shelves that I was around or had been familiar with, the Jay Shetty's a little, but they never caught my attention until that summer. And I think part of it's the physiology of people saying, people's frontal cortex doesn't fully develop until they're 25. And so I think that's part of it. But I also just don't think I was ready to learn some of the stuff that was in these books. So I'd be curious from your seat, was it someone in the Army that turned you on to this whole world, or when did you get exposed to this universe?
Yeah. I was probably around the same age, I think. I was in my second deployment, and I had, I think someone told me about this book by the 14th Dalai Lama called The Art of Happiness. And I picked up that book, and it just really opened me up to that same world. I had that same feeling. And I think it was just a great time because that deployment, there was so much going on. And I had that time to it was one day where there wasn't much going on for me to read this book. And just everything he said in that book just really tied into who I am now. And sometimes I'll just revisit it just because it was that good for me. And I pick up new jewels and gems. So that really sparked me to wanting to invest in myself in that way, in that spiritual capacity.
Now, I know you said when you were praying when you were 17, you were always taught to pray, but you didn't really, feel anything towards it. Did you grow up religious? Did you grow up, going to church? What was the relationship like, from a faith perspective growing up?
Yeah, I actually was raised I was raised Muslim. So we would go. I actually went to a Islamic school, just like a Catholic school or a Christian school. We had a Islamic school, and I went there until till 8th grade, I believe it was. And so we were very much into the religion. I was. Are you still there?
Hey, I lost you for a second there. Can you hear me, Jevon?
There you go. Now I can.
Hey,
hear you,
I'll recut it back up, but I heard you went to a Muslim school. Now let's go from there, maybe.
All
Sorry
right.
about that.
No worries. So I was actually raised Muslim, and just like there was Catholic schools, I went to an Islamic school until about 8th grade. So I was actually day in and day out. We were praying. We had to pray the 5 times a day. I was actually what they call the muezzin, so I called people to prayer on some days. We did Juma on Friday, so we were very, very involved in it. But also, what I felt was I was forced in it. Like I felt like I just didn't have a choice. So all of that stuff didn't stick with me. I actually feel like I kind of went away from it because I felt like I had no choice. So as I was growing older, I did everything I could to not be in that space.
Now, looking back, what do you think it is? I hear this from so many folks that grew up in some sort of religious context. What do you think is missing in maybe it's the Western world, in the tying in from religion and faith, just in the sake of like helping people kind of maintain that continuity? Because I feel like I've heard so many stories of people, being raised one way, falling off, in their 20s or what have you, and then picking it back up later on. And maybe that's been going on for all of time, and I'm just more aware of it now because of where I sit in my age bracket and, social media, being able to talk about these things. But what do you think it is about maybe it's, teenage years through 20s that maybe causes people to miss out or get less involved with religion and faith?
Yeah. And I think it is something that happens from a cultural standpoint and a religious standpoint. So if we look at a lot of cultures in ancient civilizations today, the youth do not carry those traditions, right? Even in like the Native Americans, they're struggling now to keep their culture. A lot of the African cultures, they're struggling because the youth want to go and do something else. So I feel like it's just it's just a cycle that happens. And the reason why is because you want to go experience different things. Now, if you had a choice, I feel like that's what's missing. Once you feel like you have a choice, you don't want to do that anymore. You want to see what else is out there. And then later on, a lot of us end up coming back to whatever it is or adopting some of those philosophies when we actually understand what's going on. Like me, even me, I'm a Christian now, but I adopted a lot of the Muslim ways of thinking because I realized how powerful it was. So yeah, I just feel like that's the cycle, man. As we
I
grow
agree.
older.
Makes sense. It makes sense. Now, when you were deployed, what was that like for you in terms of, reforming this new world that you were creating? You go from maybe lack of structure growing up to insane structure in the army, and then you get released into being a civilian again. What was that journey like for you and kind of getting on, I guess, starting civilian adulthood?
Yeah, for me, each deployment was different. I deployed 3 times, and the first deployment, it was excitement. I was excited, to go somewhere. I think at that time maybe I had only been out of the country once. So it was like I was excited to see this new world and see the Middle East and all these things that I had saw on the news to see what the experience would really be like. And it really, 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 I surmise that everyone needs to travel outside of their bubble, right? And go to a different culture. Because what I experienced with interacting with those people really, really, really opened my eyes to the fact that the media, the media always, they want what works for them, what draws the eyes, but it's completely different than what they were talking about. And to be able to experience it for myself, and develop relationship with people I thought I would never meet. It was just a beautiful, beautiful thing, man. And what it really did for me now is not only am I open to different experiences and cultures, but I welcome it. So I travel often with my family, my wife and my daughter. We always try to make it a point to at least go to a couple of new places, and immerse ourselves in different cultures, so we can kind of tap into that.
Now, maybe a quick tangent here. I hear maybe a dog in the background. What type of dog do you have?
Yeah, Shiba Inu. So I don't know why he was crying. Maybe someone was at the door,
No,
but he's a Shiba Inu, man.
he's jealous that I'm getting some free time with you. That's all.
There you go. Do you have a dog?
No, no, I love dogs. Don't have one right now. I travel too much and don't have a yard to give it the space that it deserves. But one day I definitely will.
Oh, I definitely
No,
understand. Yeah, they take a lot of energy. They need to run
100%,
around for sure.
100%. Now, 100%. So, as you were rounding out your time in the army, what was that process like for you in getting into the civilian world? Did you have to apply for jobs when you were finishing? Like when you were still
Absolutely.
still active duty, you applied to jobs like when if you were like leaving college?
Yeah, they give you about 6 months out. Well, a year to 6 months. They're doing a whole bunch of transitional stuff to kind of prepare you. So they help you with resume writing. They help you like get your skills, translating like the military jargon into like civilian skills. So they really do well. And sadly, a lot of vets don't use all the benefits that are there, but yeah, they prepare you pretty well. Now, what you don't get prepared for is the difference between the civilian world and the military, right? Like you mentioned structure and all that stuff. We do things a lot differently in the military than corporate worlds, and you can say things a certain way in the military that you can't do in the corporate world. So like learning that type of thing and the different cultures, that was a shock.
Now, you went to some massive organizations from GD to Deloitte, as mentioned. I'm missing not Qualtrics. There's another one you worked at. I can't think of right
Splunk,
now. Splunk, and then
yes.
there's one with the green logo. That's what the Qualtrics one. That's what I'm thinking. It's not Qualtrics. Let me see on my notes here. And
Uh,
then and then Consumer Reports. That was the other
oh,
one.
consumer reports. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's the green logo I was thinking of. Now you jumped at a bunch of different big organizations, going and then starting a small company of your own. What was that experience and journey like for you? What got you to make that decision to go off on your own? Get us up to speed from civilian life, job one till the other steps along the way to now where you are with your current consulting role?
Absolutely. So I always knew like tech was cool, right? It paid the bills, but it really never fed my soul. So everything I did in those companies, Consumer Reports was my favorite experience by far because of the culture. It was a smaller organization, and the work they did, I really truly believed in everything they did. You know, making sure that there was fair consumer rights and they knew about the products. But I just felt like all the other stuff, like me protecting the data, even though by proxy I'm serving the customers, it just didn't feel like the purpose that I envisioned as I got out the military. So I started my company, what it is known today as BrightMind Consulting Group. I actually started it in 2017 while I was in Afghanistan, and it was known as Live Not Loathe. And I had started it because I really wanted to help. I seen, how the soldiers were dealing with like morale and, wanting to be home and all the different issues that entailed. And then I thought about on the world on our side, right, back home, that there's other people feeling that way, even though they have access to their families, they have a job and all that stuff. They still feel like something is missing. So that's really where the coaching side of things came from. And it has since evolved into what it is today, where I also consult and do speaking engagements and stuff. But the purpose is all to inject empathy, right? Whether that's into a leader, into a culture, into someone else's mind about themselves, it's all to inject empathy so that person and that business can serve in a better way. And I had worked up until 2022, 2021, I was working. And then I decided like I needed to go full force on this. I had got laid off from Splunk, right? And I was like, instead of going back, why not just invest, right? What did I have to lose? And that allowed me to really be where I am today, to like put all of it in. Napoleon Hill talks about burning the bridges, so to speak, to really step into your purpose. And that's really what it is now.
It's a pretty crazy phenomenon that I hear from just about all of my guests, yourself included, in burning the bridges. And I really do feel like that's the missing link for any creator, entrepreneur, builder that's looking to, level up and take to the next level. And it's so, obviously it's easier said than done, but it's also it's so outside of the norm, so outside of the realm of possibilities for so many people that worked so hard to get to, where they are. This is me speaking for, where I'm at too, right? Like these, whether it's, I want to call it golden handcuffs or, I went to school for all these years just to, quit my job. If I went to go quit my job and start my own thing,
Yeah,
it's a scary, daunting thought.
it is.
The question I always ask the people in your shoes is, mechanically speaking, what was that like for you? Did you go and say, okay, I'm going to take 3 months and brainstorm what BrightMind was going to look like? I'm going to take 3 months and try to build out a client list of 100 possible clients. What was that like for you going pen to paper, getting BrightMind started?
Yeah, I mean, for me, yes, I did some of that, but really, I'm a build the plane as I fly it type of person. Because again, I knew that however I expected it to go, if I wrote it down pen to paper, it wasn't going to go that way. So I really just started like, okay, what is the minimum viable information, right, that I needed to know to make it a product that would survive, right? And then what does my audience want? What do they need? What are their issues? So that's really what the key components was. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, right? I just said, okay, let me reach out to this person. Let me do this thing. Let me put out this piece of information that I feel like will be valuable to folks. And that's really what it was. And then the information I started sharing on like social platforms and YouTube and all these other things was answers that I wanted to know, or questions I wanted to know the answer to myself. And that's really how it all got started. And then, people would come to you and say, oh man, I'm so glad you posted that today. right? Whatever it is. And that's just the affirmations like, okay, you're on the right track. Now, when you said it's a scary thing, man, it is, and that feeling does not go away. At least it hasn't for me. Because it's always, you have to get the food. No one's going to pay you, no matter if the day is slow or if you're working your butt off, right? You have to get the food. So that is the key piece that I tell everyone. Like, make sure you understand the gravity of that. that whether it's up or down, you still have bills to pay, and you still, if you have a family, you still have a family to take care of. But that's also a motivator for me, because I know that I'm doing something that's purposeful, and when it is down, I know that if I continue to work, if I continue to learn the lessons for things that do fail, that it's all going to, in the end, that I'm serving in my purpose. So it's going to work in some way, shape, or form, whatever that looks like. Again, I don't control the outcomes.
Do you think that's just the entrepreneur's paradox, though? Do you think that Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, do you think they ever? I feel like they probably feel that same scary feeling that you feel, or you were just talking about. I feel
Yes.
like it doesn't go away, and I think it
No.
doesn't matter if you're scraping by to make your first $1,000 or first $1 billion as a creator, entrepreneur, investor, what have you. I feel like it's just kind of the inherent nature of the beast, which is no one's no one's there to catch you. You are your safety net and your parachute, and you're building it or packing it at the same time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That for sure. And then you also want it to work. Like, you started
Right.
being an entrepreneur for a reason, right? You wanted to solve a problem. So I feel like that, as long as that problem exists, you're always going to be, like you said, thinking like, oh man, is this going to work? Right? And all these other thoughts that go into your head as an entrepreneur. So yeah, I believe that they probably feel that. Of course, I'm not at their level, but I
In a
believe they
different
still
way. In a
still
different
have
way,
that.
but yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Now,
For sure. I mean, you look at Bill Gates. You mentioned Bill Gates. He started a whole charity, and that's all he does now, right? Because
yeah,
of that paradox.
totally, man. Now, for BrightMind today, what does your all suite of services look like? I'm sure it's evolved since you launched full time, but what does today's catalog of services look like for you? Is there a portion of the business that you're most excited about, that you're looking forward to growing and building and scaling more this calendar year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the portion that we're really looking to scale today is that leadership development piece. So we've really introduced and revamped what that would look like. So now there's three ways that we can serve. So we have the workshop facilitation and presentations. We have the coaching, whether that's a group, a team, or a individual, and then we also have the consultation or the consulting, where we come in and help to make those, build those empathetic cultures and help a leader become more empathetic as well, to drive the bottom line, since that's really what matters to these organizations, but we have to do it through the people. So we really want to make organizations human again, and that's what we're most excited about. We also offer marketing services as well, but that's that just becomes a part of the business. People are like, how did that happen? Well, it happened because there was a need, right? The business owners would come and say, hey, how do we get more people loving us? So we have this marketing side of the business that I really, really enjoy us having. But for me, the bread and butter, the thing that really ignites me is the leadership and organizational development.
It's so cool, the point about culture focused companies. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're on this wave pretty early, or earlier than most, because now I've started to see it more and more on my socials with the thought leaders that I follow, of businesses really, like, I feel like for so long it was, let's put kombucha in our kitchen and we'll hire the best talent, right?
Yes.
Or hey, let's give now, like, now people are, I feel like, at a point in life. I feel like we're at a point in society here, at least in the Western world, where post pandemic, the work from home flexibilities don't really mean anything anymore. People are, I've heard some people like that are trying to come back to the office because they're looking for that social connection because of the
Yes.
social creatures that we are. A lot of people have realized, I think probably because of stimulus checks and just the craziness over the last couple of years, that at a certain point, I feel like we're both in a similar boat. We're fortunate to work at big companies and see, like, at a certain point, like, the extra dollar or $5,000 or $10,000 is incredibly helpful, but we all have the same amount of PTO days. We get the same health insurance. We get the same period. And it's just a matter of, like, hey, are you going to spend that extra $10 to stay at the, Holiday Inn or the Marriott when you go on vacation? That's pretty much all you're deciding between. Am I going to get the economy or the economy plus on my flight? That's really all it is, working a job where you're making 100K versus 300K these days.
Yes.
And so this idea of culture-focused companies, I feel like, is going to get bigger and bigger, where companies are starting to realize, hey, it doesn't matter if I throw a $400,000 comp plan at someone if the place kind of sucks to work at or the people here suck. Yes. And so I feel like you guys are in a beautiful sweet spot, and this is just my true objective perspective here, in a beautiful sweet spot, moving into this post-pandemic world, in air quotes for anyone listening on audio, whatever you want to call it, post-pandemic world, in order to help companies build ecosystems that are enjoyable to be around and people want to spend time around. Point being is, I'm excited for where you guys sit, and I think that this nice intersection of creating businesses that people want to spend time at with other bright minds, that's the biggest thing. I love my job right now, and I get the question from a lot of folks, like, hey, like, why haven't you quit yet, or why don't you go podcast full time, or whatever it is. And the big thing, I think, more than anything else, I feel fortunate that I'm making a good living, but the big thing is I love the people I work with, and I love the work that I do. I feel like if I hated my job, I would have been gone a year ago, even with little to no income from the podcast, just because I didn't really care to. But I like my job enough now where I'm like, I'll stick around a little longer. I'm gonna, keep doing this until I have a reason not to, or until I, hit a point in my podcasting and other salaries that makes sense for it. But I don't see that happening anytime soon, because I like my job. I get paid enough for it, and I like the people that I work with. And I feel like if other companies could do the same thing, you probably retain a lot better talent, even if it's not all about the money at the end of the day. And I don't even mean to say that from the point of entitlement. I truly think that a lot of people don't really need that much to be happy anymore. The pandemic really made people realize that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a study that came out recently that talked about how people would take less money if they received what you're talking about, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right, because at a certain point, the money doesn't mean as much if you're being treated like crap, right? Or if you don't have time to spend it, or you're stressed out and burned out, right? So you're definitely spot on. And for a long time, you mentioned that the Keurig machine or something in the office, right, with all these benefits, and it was really just designed to keep you at work longer. It was a benefit to the company. So now people have gotten smart and say, hey, I don't want all those empty benefits that I don't really take advantage of. Anyway, give me, the freedom, give me autonomy, give me opportunity, give me, these certain things that really are non-negotiables. And now people have the power to negotiate. So it's really, as if we were talking real estate terms, it's more of a buyer's market, right? So now I don't have to go with this company or stay in this crappy environment, because there's so many others. And the advent of, job boards and all this other stuff has really helped that, because now you can see all your options in one spot, so to speak. So it just really, really, really gives you, the choice. And I think that that's what's really key for people when it comes to, staying in a job or leaving.
Yeesh. Hey, sorry, I got you back now. Jeez, crazy. I'll round us out here, and then I don't know what's going on. Maybe the recording's messed up. Well, let me ask you this then. If I've been listening to this episode and I'm thinking, hey, everything Jevon's saying is, right up my alley, everything I need to be hearing, where's the best place for them to get in touch with you? What's the ideal BrightMind's client look like? What's the, call to action here for anyone listening that wants to get in touch?
Absolutely. So I like LinkedIn. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, JEVONWOODEN. You'll see the light bulb next to my name. Or you can just reach out to me at jwooden@brightmindcg.com. Shoot me an email. I'll be happy to respond. The client for me, the ideal client for me, is really like a key decision maker, at an organization. And I say that because I don't want to just help that person. I want to help that culture. So that person, if we can coach them to really become a better leader in person, then that's going to go ahead and trickle down into the people they lead, and they're going to make better future leaders, and it's just going to be a domino effect.
I love it. If you're listening to this and your boss is a key decision maker, maybe it's not you, but your bosses, and they need some culture check or they need something, maybe just float Jevon's name and say, hey, I was listening to this awesome podcast and there was this incredible coach on there, incredible, guy. His name was Jevon. You should check him out. Maybe that's a good qualified way to get you some qualified leads. Jevon is a way to help people listen to this show, maybe get their bosses in check by having some sort of culture check. So it's a two-way street there. But man, I'm so appreciative of you for jumping on, man, and sorry for the technical difficulties, but excited we'll have to do this in person sometime soon, so we don't have to deal with that at all.
Yeah, we need to, man, because I could literally talk to you probably all day, bro. we are here for sure.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.